So, greetings everyone, welcome. The topic for this evening, as you can see, is the power of our self-talk. So here in Unity, we have this belief that words carry tremendous creative power. One of our co-founders, Charles Fillmore, said this, that words carry vibrations through the universe and actually move the intelligence that is inherent in every form of life. So words carry this immense creative power. Of course, a lot of us don't have to be taught that words carry a lot of power. Many of us have experienced this right in our own lives. We've been blessed by words that have been fitly spoken by just that right person at that right time. Words like, I love you, or you can do it, or you deserve to be happy. Words like, I trust you. I trust you to know what to do. Words fitly spoken. But then there's also, for probably too many of us, the experience in the negative, especially in our early years when we can be a little bit more vulnerable to the words of others, right? And so we've had the experience of the power of words that were spoken to us, sometimes even well-intentioned words that will tell us these messages of lack and of limitation, such as, you're never going to make a living doing that, right? Or, you're not very attractive. Or, you're not that smart, honey. Right? Words like that, and often I've kind of modified that because I don't even want to speak those words aloud, but you know that most of us have heard words that are actually harsher than the words that I've just uttered. So we've experienced the impact, the power of words that speak to us lack and limitation in our own beings. So we have this experience that words can be immensely powerful. They can uplift us and they can tear us down in our experience, right? Well, in Unity, while we might have felt hurt, wounded, put down by other people's words, in Unity, we focus on our sense of personal responsibility. We focus on the idea that ultimately, here now in the present moment, it is we who have to take responsibility for the impact of words on our lives. And it's we who have to take control of the fact that it's not what someone said to us 20 years ago or even 2 minutes ago that really hurts us, but the way in which we repeat that message in our heads and then amplify it. Repeat it and amplify it each day. I remember early on the message that I was fat or unattractive stuck with me such that even beyond the messages that my family sent me, I became my own worst critic on that topic, right? Paying attention to our self-talk is vital for a few reasons. One is that if you're anything like me, you do it a lot, meaning there's a lot of chatter that goes on in here all the time. Our self-talk is persistent, ongoing. And the other reason it's important to pay attention to our self-talk is no matter how much time any of us might spend with our loved ones, we are the only people that we spend 100% of the time with, right? I mean, the Buddhists have this saying, wherever you go, there you are. Dang it, right? So because of this, I think it's very important to remember my big message for today is how about we decide to become our own BFF? And some of the gals here might know what that means. Our own best friend forever. That's the term. So my invitation to you today is to become your own BFF. So, as we start thinking about that, I'm going to invite you to just ask yourself right now, how much of a friend are you actually to yourself? Think about that. How nice are you to yourself? Or are you one of those who have said, like I have, I'm my own worst enemy, right? Or I'm my harshest critic, you say. So I've heard this so many times out of my own mouth and out of my friend's mouth. And the funny thing about this is when we say it, we usually say it like we're so noble for the fact. I'm my own worst critic. Like that's a good thing. But if we step back and we think about it, and if you consider, if I had said something like that about my husband, if I had said, oh yeah, I'm his worst enemy, or I'm his worst critic, you'd be like, she's mean, right? What a meanie, right? But we bully ourselves in that way. And I know, maybe like some of you, initially I thought that I would do this because it would be a positive thing. I had this idea that if I critiqued myself, was my own worst enemy, that I would improve myself, right? That by critiquing myself, that I would make my life better and then therefore I would be happier. And it's true. If I continually critique myself, I will accomplish more in the outer. I will get much more done, but I will not be happier. I will not have more peace. I can accomplish all this in the outer as I've done in my life, but I will not have the peace that I was looking for as a result of those accomplishments. Many of us have heard of the famous affirmation guru named Louise Hay, who basically pulled herself out of poverty and of sickness through the use of affirmations. And she says this on the topic of criticism. She says, hey, you guys, well, she didn't say exactly. She said, hey, you've been criticizing yourself for years, yeah? And it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens. Try approving of yourself, expressing gratitude for yourself, and see what happens. So for those of you who are relatively new, maybe, to this positive self-talk business, I actually brought along an instructional video to share with you. And this is by another affirmation guru named Jessica. And I'm going to show it to you in a second.
Look, I can be a circ. Now, my whole house is great. I can do anything good. I like my school. I like anything. I like my dad. I like my cousins. I like my aunts. I like my Allisons. I like my mom. I like my sisters. I like my dad. I like my hair. I like my haircuts. I like my pajamas. I like my stuff. I like my rooms. I like my whole house. My whole house is great. I can do anything good. Yeah. I can do anything good. Better than anyone. Better than anyone.
We give a hand for Jessica. And you notice in the instructional video, I forgot to mention also that there's a power in body language when we do our self-talk, right? So a little dance, it helps, to embody that. And when Lynn does yoga, we'll get a little glimpse of that too. So of course, I couldn't share about positive affirmations without also reminding us of our friend Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live. I will catch the ball today because I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. I think some of our football players later might be doing that affirmation. So yeah. Not all of us, of course, care to be better ball catchers, right? But we definitely want to improve, I think, on our ability to catch ourselves, right? To catch ourselves trying to talk ourselves out of our own joy, trying to talk ourselves out of a sense of accomplishment in the moment. You know, that part that as we're just about to sit down and enjoy something we've accomplished and good, oh, look, but you haven't done right. To catch ourselves trying to talk ourselves out of that moment of peace, fulfillment, and joy and bliss. So, when we catch ourselves doing that, in the worldly, new age world of new thought or new age affirmations, a lot of times people will have us replace the negative thought with a positive affirmation about our capacity, right? People say things like, she said something about like being the best in the world, doing this, being the best catcher. And I think those are all valuable. They help us to build confidence and self-esteem. But my invitation to you is to go deeper, even with our affirmation work. Because here in Unity, we teach that a true affirmation is not necessarily about affirming something in the outer, affirming like, oh, you're going to get an A+ on that test, or you're going to get that Mercedes that you wanted. But a true affirmation in Unity affirms the beautiful truths that Victor was singing about. A true affirmation speaks to that which is fundamentally already true. See, trying to become a better catcher is something that is not fundamentally already true. But what is fundamentally already true, as we teach in Unity, is that you are already whole and perfect. You are already worthy and wonderful and beautiful. You are already fully deserving and fully capable of living your most magnificent life, like right now. Not eventually when you get some degree or other. But in this moment, you have that full capacity. And so an affirmation that is true, a word of positive truth, speaks that kind of universal truth. And you can kind of sense or know whether it is that kind of truth when you can universalize it, meaning the fact that I am love is true for everyone, not just one person or another. The fact that someone's a great football player may be true of some and not others. So that's one way that we know. So I'm going to invite us to go even deeper. For some of you who have been in Unity, who know about this idea of positive self-talk, the idea of becoming our own BFF is definitely one about coming to become like our own cheerleaders, right? So a true friend, when we think about what makes a true friend, we want a friend who will cheer for us, encourage us, support us, and that's important. But a true friend, in my view, also is a person who can sit with the darkest parts of me, the darkest parts of ourselves, and hold space for that without trying to change it. Just be there with, as a loving, unconditionally accepting presence. And so becoming our own BFF, or best friend forever, means being willing to do this. So as I shared last week, today's part of a series, as I shared last week during our exploration of chapter 3 in Robert Brumet's book, Birthing a Greater Reality, we talked about our collective evolution. And he makes this core point in his book that our collective evolution as a human race depends on our personal evolution, our willingness to do our personal work. And then we added to that more specifically last week, that the fundamental personal work that is necessary for us to move forward is the work of embracing our shadow parts. The parts of ourselves that we repressed as kids because we thought those were unacceptable. I shared that for me, core shadow pieces were incompetence and laziness. That's not me. That's other people, right? Yeah. So fundamental to our ability to move forward is our ability to embrace our shadow. And the idea is this: early on, we may have thought we needed to repress parts of ourselves in order to survive. But now, in our spiritual maturation, in our psychological maturity, what it takes to thrive is to dig even deeper, to now re-embrace those shadow parts and bring them into the light of our love and of our awareness. So, the goal is to do this. The problem that we all face is these are the very emotions and energies that we detest. They're the ones that we're most ashamed of. These are the ones that we can't even most of the time admit that we have, because to us, they're disgusting. They're horrifying. They're the things that we judge most in other people. How could we possibly own, much less love, that peace in ourselves? And yet that's the call, to do that, to love with that deeper love, to love with what I would call unconditional or divine love. And so Robert gives us some guidance in his book. There are lots of methods and ways of embracing our shadow. Robert teaches us one that I'm going to share with you today. It's called dialoguing with our shadow. So I think of this as self-talk, the master's course, right? It's like the graduate program in self-talk. So that's how I hold it. And so we muster up the courage, we build up our strength through the affirmations with our mirrors, and then we get to this deeper work. And so how do we do this? Robert gives us steps in his book. The books in our bookstore, I know a lot of you already have it. But basically the first step is this. We first, like in all healing, have to acknowledge the shadow part. But the problem is, a lot of times, this is exactly what's unconscious in us, right? We don't recognize it as our own. So how do we start to recognize it? Well, one step is to recognize the finger that we're pointing at other people, right? So the idea is that we begin to recognize a shadow part by the fact that we judge this thing really harshly in other people. And it seems to only be in them and not in us, right? Whether it's like those selfish people over there, right? And we'll notice that it's a repeat issue. So, when we go through our regular emotions on a daily basis, when it's a shadow piece, it repeats. You break up with this person, you end the relationship, you date someone else, and it's the same situation, you're seeing the same issue. It's a repeat issue. So those two, you have an extraordinary reaction to it, and it's a repeat issue. So what do? When you can finally spot that, you catch yourself. You do this thing called dialogue using a journaling process. So the invitation is, and again, putting it on paper can really help make it just concrete and out there. So what we do is this. For instance, let's say I'm judging someone and I think, oh my gosh, that thing that they did is shameful. Gosh, shameful. When I'm thinking like that, I go and I'm like, oh, maybe I have some shame in me, maybe, but let's start with just the judgment. So what I do is I go to my journal and I make my judge an actual character. So this is different from what a lot of us do, which is I'll analyze it in my journal, I'll process it. You're actually going to make it a character, and you're going to sit and let it speak to you. Let that character, let the judge speak to you. And then listen. That's the second step. Listen. And then you might want to put conscious mind, then respond back, and thus begin a dialogue process. You will find that you might have to do this a few times before you can start to flesh out truth. But the experience people have in doing this is over time, as they converse with this judge, then suddenly something starts to happen in your outer life. You're starting to feel shame. You're starting to have this experience of shame. Then you recognize, oh, shame is my shadow part. And so the next step is now I'm going to have a conversation with shame. So you put shame down, Sally the shamer, something like that. Give it a character. You put shame down, and then you start to have the same gentle, loving conversation. In this, you don't censor or edit, right? There's no judgment about what's happening. You give it space to really be honest. You might want to burn the paper afterwards so your partner doesn't see it. But you want to be able to be completely honest in this conversation and open and accepting. And then as we do that, we find then that muck that resides inside of us, that we couldn't even own as ours starts to rise to the surface, then it gets even uglier for a time. That very thing that we judge so harshly, right? And that's the time for the deepest level of self-love and acceptance, where we hold space like a good friend. We sit there with that feeling and just let it be without trying to change it, right? Trying to change something is already rejecting it. So we sit there and we just let it be. And we observe it for what it is. We don't ask it why. That starts to go into analysis and we move out of our feeling. You don't ask why. It's more like what? Oh, this feeling, this sensation in my body, this sinking feeling that I didn't want to feel when I was a kid. I can feel it now as an adult. And by doing this, we start to heal when we start to integrate our shadow. So, that's the process. It's a very powerful process. It is the second level of the positivity of unity. We're really not about positive as a polarity that negates the negative. To me, what is truly positive is that which affirms the whole of life, holds the whole. And so many of us, positive affirmations, though, are a beginning part of our journey, right? We need it a lot of times because some of us are so broken down that before we're even willing to enter into that dialoguing with shadow part, we need those words of encouragement. We want to look in that mirror and say, you are awesome and you are worthy and you deserve to know yourself better. You deserve to be awake. You deserve peace. These are things that we can do through our mirror talk. That's the first step. And then the second step is to then embrace and dialogue with our shadow parts, those darker parts. So, I'm going to close here to give you some time to kind of be with this inner part of yourselves. Again, I want to reiterate that as a starting point, it's essential that we start to just simply be more loving towards ourselves, to really befriend ourselves, even in terms of self-esteem, but to not stop at self-esteem, because that's just the beginning. As we learn to actually embrace our shadow, we enter into a deeper knowing of what I would call self-love. And as we love like that, the more we come into this knowing of our wholeness, the more we come into a knowing of that which we have continually in the past sought for in the outer, through accomplishments, through other people's approval, through even for the seeking of some externalized God love. We start to find at the depths of our own being. And before I invite Victor to take us into a time of meditation, I want to share these words with you from his song earlier, Beautiful Truth. Only your word, only to speak so purely, only your light, only your love to speak in a world full of beautiful truths. I'm seeking your voice because you are the source of all beautiful truth. I'm making the choice to look for your words in all that I do. Were I alone, were I among no others, still I would hear, my heart would hear in this empty room such a beautiful truth.